Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Buddhism for Everybody. This video is about relative truth. Relative truth, as the word indicates, means that one thing is compared to something else in relation to something else. Hot is relatively hot compared to cold. Light is relatively light compared to dark. It doesn't mean something is hot or cold, light or dark in an absolute sense. It is comparative. We experience everything in a relative sense like this. We're always comparing one thing to another. I like this. I don't like that. This food is too spicy, or this food is too bland. As human beings, there are many things we agree on because our experiences have a lot of similarities, and our perceptions of these experiences tend to be similar. A hot day, say 105 degrees Fahrenheit, we agree is a hot day. And a cold day, maybe minus 20 degrees Fahrenheit, is cold. But even this is relative because it depends on what you're used to. Do you live in a polar region or in the tropics? Then these temperatures may still be hot or cold, but they impact you less than someone from another climate. In Buddhism, relative truth is a pivotal topic because when you begin to understand and apply it to your thinking and your experiences, all the other Buddhist principles and teachings take on clarity and a much deeper meaning. So to begin with, there are two categories of relative truth. What's called perceived relative truth, and this is the truth we perceive as sentient beings. Each being's truth relies on their perceptions, and of course it relies on their views. And for more details on the role of the view, check out the video dedicated to that topic. Actual relative truth is the truth perceived by enlightened beings. And this is summarized in what Buddha Shakyamuni taught as the Four Noble Truths of the Enlightened. Perceived relative truth, actual relative truth. Let's look at these two in more detail. Beginning with perceived relative truth, it is to perceive and then compare and arrive at some presumed truth. So what is a perception? There is some technical language here. So sentient beings are single present moment thinking only. This thinking knows subject. Subject is me. Then there is everything else, what is not me. And these are objects of perception. The statement is perceiver perceives percept as perception. I am the subject or the perceiver. I am engaged in perceiving, which is I am perceiving a percept, an object. And then I conceptualize the percept as a perception. That's my interpretation of that object. Sometimes the percept and the perception match, and sometimes they don't. This is a matter of interpretation or misinterpretation. For example, let's say I'm in a garden and I see what looks like a snake out of the corner of my eye. But closer inspection shows me it's just a garden hose. I had one perception initially, and on closer examination of the percept, the object, I see that it's not a snake, it is a garden hose. Now, perceptions are what we perceive with all five of our senses. It's not just visual, clearly. So this would be seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, and touching. These are five consciousnesses. Now, we normally define these as the functions of our physical body parts. But in the context of present moment thinking, sentient beings, they are qualities of thinking. And every being's perceptions are unique. Every being's thinking is unique. And because of this, the karma of each being's thinking is also unique. They can be very similar, but they're not exactly the same. So we would say similar, but not the same. Or they can be dramatically different because each being's thinking and karma are different. The 6 realms of samsara categorize all of these possibilities, and there will be a video on the 6 realms of samsara. So there's a phrase which is seeing is believing, but what are you seeing? What are the limits of our seeing? If you study this scientifically, you will know that our vision sees according to the capacity of human eyes, our eye organs, and that is visible light for us. And visible to the human eye is actually a very small percentage of the entire spectrum of light. Some put the number at less than 1% that our eyes can actually interpret. It means there's a great deal that we're not seeing, but it's still there nonetheless. So what is out there that our eyes don't see? Likewise, you can look at our sense of hearing, and we know that the audible spectrum is much larger than what our ears can hear. What are we not hearing? Good question. Now, as we are obscured sentient beings, we habitually have negative thinking and negative karma. This limits our senses. Our obscurations determine the limits of our senses. The more obscured we are, the less our senses can include everything. Enlightened beings are not obscured like sentient beings are, because they're not obscured by ego clinging. Their perceptions are also not as limited. They perceive many things that we don't. Doesn't mean they're not there. It just means that we have obscured that range of our senses. Sentient beings in total have 6 categories, which are the 6 realms of samsara. And these are 6 categories of experiences. We'll get into more details of that in a later video. But what is in common for all of these beings is each and every one is single present moment thinking only, with gross ego clinging, clinging to the illusory I. And this ego clinging itself is ignorance. It is actively ignoring one's true nature because it's clinging to the imputed I or self. And this ignorance naturally leads to all other negative thinking. And here's where we need to acknowledge this negative thinking itself is what obscures us, because it is not in accord with our nature. It blocks us from perceiving what is true. Our individual obscurations define our perceived relative truth. Whatever those obscurations are, for each of us it's a little different, that will determine our perceptions and what we believe is true based on perception. And this in turn will shape our view, the stories we tell ourselves about what's going on around us. How does it all work? What's my place here? That's our view. Here's an illustration of how this can work. I see the sun. So the subject here is me. I'm doing the seeing. And the perceiving is the seeing activity. I see, and then the sun, the object. And this sun, it sets in the west. It sets there every evening, and it rises in the east every morning, each day, again and again. So I conclude that the sun is going around the earth each day. That's what my perceptions tell me. And this is based on my point of view, which is on the surface of Earth. But if I'm in orbit, let's say I'm at the International Space Station, I see the Earth below me, and I can see it's rotating. So these are 2 very different perspectives of the same phenomena, and they draw totally different conclusions. Each of us has a unique view, and they are often very similar in many ways, but they're not the same. They're not identical. Our view determines how we understand and explain our phenomena. It's like a lens or a filter. Our views are based on our sentient being perceptions, along with our experiences and the stories we were taught, and those stories that we create. Altogether, this is our view. This is our perceived relative truth. That's one category. Then Buddha also taught actual relative truth. And this is what is true when the obscurations of sentient beings are removed, particularly the ego clinging. It's like cleaning your glasses, wiping clean a windshield. What you perceive hasn't changed, but your clarity has. You see it more directly. There's less blocking. The Four Noble Truths are describing unobscured view. There is no negative thinking or negative karma there obscuring the truth. And Buddha Shakyamuni taught these as the Four Noble Truths of the enlightened, because for an enlightened being, this is their direct experience. It is actual relative truth describing what is actually happening. It's not being interpreted through the lens of obscuration. As we progress on the path as a Buddhist, and we are antidoting our obscurations, our perceived relative truth becomes actual relative truth. It's a process. Our experiences are first perceived relative truth because they are influenced and obscured by negative thinking and negative karma, and especially ego clinging. As we antidote and purify our negative thinking and negative karma, our experiences become less obscured, less obscuration, and therefore more in accord with actual relative truth. It is revealing what has always been there. When studying Buddhist principles, what we are studying is describing actual relative truth. That's what they're based on. And they're always based on the Four Noble Truths. They are never outside of or beyond the Four Noble Truths. And gradually we can dismantle our obscured views and replace them with the actual relative truth of Buddha's teachings. This is what happens when enough negative thinking and negative karma have been antidoted, and the ignorance of ego clinging can finally and permanently be overcome. This would be an enlightened being. The ego clinging has been eliminated. This is a three-part process. There's learning, which leads to understanding, then contemplating, which leads to experiencing, and then the third is meditating, which leads to realizing. It sounds simple, but there's a little more to it than just the words. Learning is taking in the information, and this needs to be clearly understood and remembered, or it won't have a lasting effect. Then once you've learned, it's time to contemplate. And this is the process of examining the information, challenging it, and finding your doubts or your questions. Have discussions and debates. Really kick it around. Don't just let it sit there as if it's some kind of irrefutable object that you have to accept. It isn't. And this is because Buddhism never relies on blind faith. And this stage of contemplation is enormously important because at first we need reasons to believe something is true. That would be logic, reason. And then we need to develop certainty. We need to find our hidden doubts. They are valid and they are important. There will be answers and resolution to these doubts and questions. We just need to understand them as a necessary part of the process. Because if doubts are left unaddressed, they will sabotage us later on, because just pretending we believe something doesn't work. And then when the contemplating stage is complete, we move on to meditating. I'm not going to say a lot about this right now, but meditating in general is repeating. When you have identified and seen something as true, you find a way to repeat that again and again, which is accumulating. This could be prayers, aspirations, visualizations. There are all kinds of activity we can call mind training, training the mind. And I'll talk more about this in later videos. Sentient beings can understand the logic, but due to obscurations, we generally don't perceive phenomena in a direct manner. Our habits of ignorance can be obvious or they can be very subtle. And for this reason, we need to learn, contemplate, and then meditate. This is how we eliminate our obscurations, how we realize actual relative truth, and how we transcend samsara. Gradually, with diligence, we will antidote our negative thinking and our negative karma. And the antidote is always the same, repeating positive thinking. 5 categories: renunciation, compassion, faith, love, and wisdom. Relative truth is a deep topic. It's very layered, and it reveals more and more to us over time. Remember that relative truth has two categories. Perceived relative truth. My truth is what I perceive. And actual relative truth. The truth that is there regardless of my perceptions. And this, actual relative truth, is what Buddha was teaching in the Four Noble Truths. Understanding relative truth in this way will support all Buddhist principles and guide us to deeper understanding. So, I hope this video has been beneficial, perhaps even inspiring. I hope you return for more content as it is developed, and thanks for watching.